Om Shanti, and welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi, exploring the essentials of the study of Raj Yoga. And tonight our theme is yoga. So we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. But first, as always, starting with a little bit of a reflection. Seated here in a quiet way, meaning introverted, feeling my attention draw inwards as if looking inside. Entering a meditation space inside where I can experiment and experience, as well as reflect on the bigger questions of life. And in this moment, I explore the concept of belonging. There are two aspects that are so definitive in shaping our lives. One is the question of who am I? And the other explores the question of belonging. To what or whom do I belong? Every soul has this pull to belong. It shapes their sense of self, it shapes their sense of value. It creates a sense of safety, support, and security. We are interactive beings, and through interaction, relationship, we learn so much about ourselves. To what or whom do I belong? That's what we explore tonight. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, good evening, and welcome to Raj Yoga Essentials. And tonight's topic is yoga. It's a beautiful reflection, and perhaps maybe we'll ask first, what is belonging? What does that have to do with yoga? Or maybe even what is yoga?
I was hoping you'd answer that. So yoga, why do we use this word? Sometimes we don't use this word because it confuses people. So if you're listening to this and you hear the word yoga, what comes to mind? And of course, the classic answer often is Hatha yoga, physical postures, asanas, breathing. And we call that physical yoga. But the term yoga itself just means union or to yoke or link. So union suggests a relationship of some sort of connecting. And we all are actually very proficient yogis in that pure sense of the word. We're constantly connecting to or uniting with something all through the day. It could be thinking about something over and over and over. We call it reliving it. We're relating to it over and over, relating it to ourselves in our mind. Just as we might relate a story to someone else, I'm relating it to myself over and over, and it's really coloring me, the experience of reliving it over. So I'm having yoga with the past. Or we have yoga with food. We think about it over and over until our salivary glands start to work. Obviously, we can have yoga with other people, think about them over and over. And again, it's really affecting what we feel and how we experience ourselves. So we're all yogis. But Raj Yoga is a yoga that's meant to bring back the royalty, the realness, the ruling power of the self. So, obviously, I'm going to have yoga with something quite specific for those qualities to be activated again and to neutralize any sense of being a victim.
Do you think that we don't even realize the impact of what we identify with throughout the day? And how is that related into perhaps maybe the sorrow that we're feeling right now?
Yeah, this is why the word belonging is so critical. I don't think we do realize how deeply we're connecting to things and they're coloring us. And really, the principles of, or the laws, if you will, of spirituality, these invisible aspects and how much they drive our physical life. And this sort of need, especially at this time, for souls to belong, even those who say, I don't care. As someone once joked, I don't need to belong to any club. Well, that's the I don't belong to any club. So it's just a deep defining the self through that belonging is so huge. I think we can all relate to that story of high school students. And I know I went to a high school in my 12th year that the sense of groups and clubs was so pronounced. It was by far the greatest impression I had of that year. All of these different groups, and what it drove home is how deeply souls want to belong. And it deepens, it gets more and more intense as we go into the adult years. It's shaped at that time as when we start to have an identity crisis, we start to hunger for that sort of group dynamic, belonging to some group. And there's a reason that those coincide. So what we choose to belong to, it could be an ideology, anything, is deeply shaping how we behave and function.
So there seems to be a connection between that sense of belonging and a sense of self-value, like I and mine.
And this is why we sometimes also, people will feel very upset and say, you don't give me a feeling of belonging. They'll accuse someone of saying, you don't give me a feeling of belonging. What they're saying is, I don't feel valued. And as if it is someone else's responsibility to make you feel valuable. And of course, that's back to the victim model. It is my responsibility for me to feel I need an independent sense of self-value so I can actually value others. But we desperately hunger for that experience of value. And so we seek to belong to something that gives me an identity that's valuable. And now, though I am dependent on that connection to feel valuable, and if I am in any way feel rejected, my identity is affected, that sense of value is affected.
So in this context of Raja Yoga,
Mm-hmm.
for those who've taken the course, for those who haven't, we're talking about the sense of belonging in terms of what? What is it in terms of for those, and how is it helping to become royal again? Then?
So, the main premise of Raj Yoga is always happiness. Peace and happiness is always the end game. So, it's a bit like, okay, that's where I want to get to. So now let's back it up and see how we get there. So, again, we explore the idea that when we're in a physical, or we call it body conscious, but physical model, the formula we use is what's going on out there determines whether I'm peaceful and happy. Raj Yoga feels that's upside down. So it's what's going on in here, inside the self, that determines whether I feel peaceful or happy. So once you've bought into that, then we can start to make sense of why the study is structured the way it is. So the study looks at this internal state, this inner relationship. And the first thing it suggests is this seeking of peace and happiness, because we're not using that physical model, isn't a physical issue. That's sort of the first thing it suggests. It suggests it's a spiritual issue. And when we enter the realm of spirituality, we're looking at words like character, qualities, purity, and self-respect, the identity of the self. So that's the material that we're going to work with, is that sense of self, the qualities or character of the self, spirituality. And Raj Yoga tries to take that spiritual state to the highest level. Some call that human potential. Take it to the highest level. And at the highest level, we are able to be a master of our own inner kingdom, our own happiness. So it's independent of anything outside. That requires incredible wisdom, power, and character to do. So that's what Raj Yoga looks at. So how is that going to happen? It's funny, we had a class today. It could be a very slow boat if I try to do that on my own. So we have a fairly fast track. I know it seems like a slow track to some, but a fairly fast track where we're going to look at this idea of inheritance. That I am going to inherit a stage that will sustain happiness. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But it only works if inheritance, this term inheritance is quite critical. We don't say borrow or buy, but inherit a stage. And the reason that word inherit is so wonderful, inherit means relationship, right? So you inherit from your father, right? Your father has some property and you're going to inherit that property. Or sometimes we say like father, like son. So that means this is all only going to work if that relationship is authentic. It can't be imagined or intellectual or contrived. It's got to be the real thing. And the one I'm going to have that relationship with is the one who has the property I'm seeking, that very elevated spiritual character. Some call it divinity. So that would be the divine one, the supreme soul. Some know as God. So having a really honest relationship with that being, so that then I inherit that divine character. So as you're listening now, I want you to think about the relationships in your life and how natural they are, right? So it might be a mother or a brother or a husband or a wife. And it's just so natural. You don't have to try and say, oh, I got to remember they're my wife. I've got to remember. I keep forgetting.
Have to chant.
I know. Like it's so natural. It's fascinating to me how natural it is. So try and imagine having that same quality. I know it sounds almost sacrilegious, very natural, very common, with God. And many say, oh, yeah, no, I feel a child of God, but I want you to be honest and compare if it's of the same quality as you have with the other souls in your life. How to have that same natural, for lack of a better word, down to earth relationship with God. That's what will get the inheritance. It's got to be. And as we discuss more, we start to realize that what are the signs that I do have that natural, down to earth relationship with God?
Sounds like it has to become such that that relationship with Him is my go to, like in an automatic way. And even when you're sharing about inheritance, it always makes me think of the word inherent,
Mhm.
something that's already innate in me. So there seems to be a connection between belonging and have I really accepted my real identity?
Mhm. So this is why this is, I think, the main sign that that relationship is real. Is the only way you can have the reason that I have this very natural relationship with, say, a physical parent is because I think I'm Judy. I think I'm this body, right? And I remember once joking with my physical mother. So the only reason you love me is because I'm inside this body. If there was a different soul inside this body, you would be pouring all your love on that soul.
Such a good point.
And they got very upset with me, of course, but but really, it's all physically based. I happen to be in this body. What if there was some other soul that was in this body? They would have all that love. So those, we say, bodily relationships are dependent on the bodies. The only way you can have a relationship with the Supreme Soul is if your identity shifts into being a soul. That's the only way it can be real. So I know I've shifted because in shifting my awareness into being a soul, it actually completely changes all those physical relationships. So I can, some say, oh no, I have a relationship with God deeper. Then you'll have to check, has those other relationships changed? Because the moment I say I'm a soul, that that's no longer my mother, that's no longer my father. That's, they're all fellow souls, fellow brothers. That is a sign that yes, I have a real relationship with God. The relationship with that being changes all the other relationships. So again, having to check because it's based on the identity of the self.
So it sounds like Raj Yoga is that journey of bridging that gap, that transforming of my sense of identity. There's this aim I want to get to of getting back to myself, but that relationship with myself and that relationship with God, that whole entire journey. So in terms of that, when you were talking about this aspect of belonging, could be belonging to an ideology. What's
Mm-hmm.
the difference then of saying this is a technique? That
Mm.
this ideology, this theory, so to speak, that I'm a soul, this theory of Raja Yoga versus if this is my reality. What's the difference between the two? And what's the seed that drives one or the other?
Yeah, I don't think anyone would ever think of their other relationships in their lives as techniques. So, it's yes, it is the pathway to happiness, the pathway to a happy heart, absolutely. But it also happens to be exploring truth. So, so it's kind of a funny situation where it's not just something that I'm using to cope, and then once I've gotten there, I forget about it all. I forget I'm a soul or anything like that, or I use it when it's convenient. This is, I am shifting, reframing, completely moving into a different way of being, a different awareness, and it's not for convenience. Um, I had a very interesting, just before coming in, so many stories are coming to my mind. Some of the original students, because they show us so much how natural, inevitable, and powerful this relationship with God is. But I was reading an email about a soul. He's one of the senior brothers, and he's had issues with cancer for a few years now, but things I think have reached the point where probably, he's looking at his last few days in the body. And they were sharing his stage. The sister who was sharing the news with the family was sharing the stage. And, it's moments like that where you're not talking technique or, this
That's so
yes, it's,
true.
it's like, this is it. This is when you figure out, am I the body or am I the soul? And what have I really, where am I going? And what have I gotten? What's going on? And they shared, it was very sweet. They shared that, it's always there's pain. So there's probably drugs involved to control the body's pain. But the soul itself, they said the soul was very healthy and happy. and very content, very, very ready, open to if they're going to transition. And what was lovely, they said all they wanted to do was spend as much time as possible in remembrance of God. That's what they'd like to do with their time. And I just found it very touching because, it seems like an extreme moment, but I think it's a time perhaps of most alive, actually, most aware of what this is all about. And the reason that they want to, very aware, as they say, the soul will transition into another birth and begin to play a new part and really accumulating for that new part, accumulating for the rest of their journey. Like what, at the end of the day, what have we, what are we at the end of it all? And I think, rather than waiting for a critical moment, it's an interesting question. Like, what am I about? What is the value of this? Like, what am I, what's my function, my purpose? Is it just to run on a treadmill through the day? It starts to seem senseless. And so relationship with spirituality, with God, a different sense of self, it actually opens up to such a more beautiful, purposeful life. I don't even think technique. I just think, the contentment of, if there's anything souls want, it's to be valuable. And, to have a valuable life, to have a purposeful life, to have an uplifting life. It's not about technique at all. If I wish to spend my day using God to get parking spots and, fix bankruptcy, you can. But I don't think that will really speak to what's at the heart of the soul, which is to realize our highest potential, to be purposeful, to be kind, as in humankind. I think that's really deep down what we want. It's just a way of living that's so elevated and beautiful, and that is God's business. And through that relationship, he's almost reminding us, yes, believe in yourself. That's who you are. You are that kind of being. So
it's beautiful where you're going, because I was thinking about purity. We seem to address it nearly every session, but it seems like such an essential piece about what does yoga or belonging to God have to do with purity, and for myself to get myself back again. Because for many, many, God is a concept. He is a faraway, distant being. It's easier to remember my best friend or somebody who gives me, a cup of soup. Purity is like a big no-no word.
One thing I noticed when in that year at high school and watching all of those different groups is what souls got from belonging is that while they're in that, they're in that group, really, they feel good about themselves. That group, those people in that group do make them feel good about, even if they have to distort themselves for that approval, that's what they're going for, is a sense of being valuable, of being approved of feeling good. And it's heartbreaking when you see the soul distort themselves to win that approval. I remember one incident, I was kind of the visiting Canadian, so I really didn't belong to any group. I was a group of one. But it put me in a beautiful position of observing, not with judgment, just again, it's such a touching thing to watch. And I remember I befriended one soul, and some did this. She belonged to a few different groups. And I remember I'd be talking to her while she's, with me. She would be one way. And then if someone came along from one of the other groups, say the cheerleading group that she belonged, she turned into a completely different person. She even spoke a different dialect. It was English, but I actually couldn't understand what she was saying because it was a different. And I literally,
Wow.
the first time it happened, I just sort of looked like an idiot because I was so shocked. And the moment that person, she reverted back to, and it leaves you with, who are you?
Yeah.
And what's heartbreaking is you are changing yourself to belong to these different groups so you feel approved of and valuable. We all do it. We
Yeah.
all do it.
Sure.
We learn it there, and then it just becomes more subtle and perhaps sophisticated, but we're all doing it. And to belong to a being who actually reinforces your true self and goes further to say, because in many religions, there is the concept of original sin, that we are innately bad. Sometimes we even say in the Course, the belief of Raj Yoga is that we are intrinsically good, pure beings. And we get a lot of arguments on that one. We always get, well, what about so and so? And what about so and so? And we say, what about so? I mean, it's not actually going against. Yes, they've experienced many things where they start to lose themselves and our character gets distorted. But what we're suggesting is that we are intrinsically, innately good. This is actually the basic meaning of saying you're a child of God. I am innately good. And so to be with someone, belong to someone who I call God the value maker, who actually reinforces my true sense of self. And we know that's our truth because it's going to get to the point where that soul's not even necessary anymore. We're just left with our innate goodness. So God as the purifier is basically the value maker, that being with that one helps me to let go of all of these things that are not me. And all that will remain is pure me. And again, we're saying that true or pure you is intrinsically good.
Mm-hmm.
So what will remain is absolutely beautiful. So that's yoga with God.
What has your experience been like in that feeling of that resonance, that connection, that feeling of belonging?
It's really interesting because we say, consider yourself to be a soul, a point of light, be with the Supreme Soul, a point of light. And we're just doing everything we can to get you free. Because after a while, points of light kind of go away. And what you're left with is nothing physical, just pure feelings, qualities, very elevated feelings and qualities. That's where we want to get to. We have to say points so you'll let go of everything else. But we want to get to that space of just these really pure, beautiful feelings. And when connected to that being who is so difficult to describe in physical words, we don't have, because we're using language, but just beautiful is a term often used, but this egoless, benevolent, unlimited, and when I say unlimited, I mean heart. To say God judges is so far from what that soul is about. To be with that kind of being, so many things happen simultaneously. You feel your own ego start to just melt just a little. It's become pretty hardened, so it's going to take a lot of treatments. But you feel it melt just a little. So just a drop of self-respect comes back, and you start to feel very real, in the sense of, why am I trying to prove myself all the time? You start to feel very real, this deep, deep peace. You also will perhaps feel some of your ugliness as well come out. Not because that being makes you feel ugly, but in that being you see, it's like a mirror. You get to see everything that's happened to the self. So there's a lot of different things that happen when you're with that soul. But above all else, I think you get a real taste of, your pure original self. Um, it's like a reunion with the self when you're with that being. I think the deepest longing, sometimes souls take the course and they start to cry sometimes, because I think there's a deep longing in the heart of every soul to get themselves back. They really miss themselves. And we try to make it feel better by saying, you're God, I'm God, we're all God. It doesn't really work because we're not. But we want to just get ourselves back, get back that goodness, that powerful, that royal sense of self. We just want it back. And it's our own activity that's made us feel quite bad about ourselves. So, that has to be addressed. What's the burden on the conscience? We sometimes say that soul makes one feel worthy, but God does not have an easy part to play, because that soul's trying to uplift, and we are very self-punitive and self-destructive. So it's difficult to begin that relationship. We're so used to bowing down to God, which is a very unnatural relationship to have with a parent. So how even to just stop that old dynamic and to start having this beautiful relationship with that soul.
I think that segues into, perhaps we'll leave it as a last question so there's a little bit more time for us to experiment. Um, why do we need to learn then to belong? That, to have this belonging to Him. I mean, we've been all endeavoring to do so. Well, maybe not all, but many have been endeavoring to do so. So why? What do I have to learn?
Raj Yoga is actually a fascinating study where you unlearn. It's a journey of unlearning. We sometimes call it a reductive process because we're so used to learning being, I'm going to put some information in there. We actually have a lot of information in there, which is completely useless to us at this juncture. So it's actually a lot of letting go of old ideas, old beliefs. So we call it a process of remembering. We have these other ideas that are on top of these memories that we kind of have to let go of. So it starts by remembering I'm a soul, and that kind of unlocks the key, starts this process of letting go of a bunch of ideas that really are quite damaging to the self, actually. So there's a lot of unlearning that happens with that remembering. So we say yoga means to remember.
Maybe I'll squeeze in one last question. It's a sensitive question in a way, because we can get quite protective, I suppose, of our own personal relationship. So what would your response be? Because this isn't about trying to destroy one's relationship with God.
It's definitely not. I think at the end of the day, if you look at even a family with many children, the children share the same parents, but definitely each child has their own unique relationship with that parent. And if you interview the children, they all would have a different sharing on the parents. So yes, every soul will have a different unique experience with that being. But back to the story of the soul who has cancer, is leaving the body. At some point, whatever relationship I have with God, it will be tested. And, we want to ensure that we have a relationship that is actually benefiting the self, getting us to our destination. It got to the point in our history where we actually would go and conquer other lands, kill other people, and say God was inspiring us to do that. So we really have to check if the relationship I'm having with that being is connected to the destination I want to reach. And hopefully having that in place before a big test comes along. I've met many souls who are in that point of transitioning, and that's when you really discover what your sense of self is and what your relationship is to those big questions of what's going on in the world, who is God, all of this really. So before that happens, I say they seem most alive at that time, addressing things really important. It's nice to do that beforehand and check, is the relationship I have really enabling me to reach my destination? The deep feeling that every being, has a right certain birthrights, if you will, but a right to self-respect, a right to happiness, a right to self-rulership, to be a really positive force in the world. So is my relationship supplying those kinds of attainments? To check that.
Thank you. Very thought provoking things for us to explore. I feel like we should extend this to another session, but perhaps maybe the time that we have left, we can have that experience of what that feels like.
We tend to take so many supports in our day-to-day life, and those supports can be quite overt, quite physical. They can be physical possessions or people, and they can also be more subtle expectations and ideas. And we become quite sensitive to changes in those supports. If we lose the possessions or people change, our expectations aren't met, our happiness goes, we react. That is, we step away from our highest potential, and our self-respect dips. We accumulate so many of these incidents simply because we have external supports. The ideal is that I am self-sufficient, that I can trust myself, that I no longer take from the world to be happy, that I am full and complete and content, and therefore contribute to a happy world. How can I reach that state? Something has to happen within the self, healing within the self, becoming whole and well, peaceful, powerful, pure. There is only one surgeon who can perform such a healing operation. One being who I can trust with my spiritual stage. And that being is God. No human being can truly restore my self-respect. No human being can deeply heal my heart. Only the Supreme Soul, God, my spiritual parent, can restore me to my full state of being, my highest potential. I can avoid this issue by staying caught up in day-to-day life, but it will always be there in the back of my mind, in my conscience. At some point, I will have to face my own spiritual well-being. And God is patient. When I am ready, the journey towards Him can begin. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. So thank you for joining us this evening. Seems like all the topics related to Interview with the Raj Yogi and Raja Yoga Essentials. They're all very much interconnected. And so we encourage souls to go back to the archive playlist. We might send those links out to all, but not to take in more information actually, but just to really go deeper. And the intention is to actually deepen that experience of being a soul, deepen an experience of what that connection is, Supreme Soul. And so I'm going to pass this over to Judy in terms of upcoming sessions, especially we're starting the new month as well. For those who haven't taken the course, or for those who have, very good to experience. Shanti.
Thank you, Nora. So, ironically, in Inner Fitness this Saturday, which is on our Zoom platform, the topic is healing. And I just find this such a wonderful topic, especially when you look at spiritual healing. I think it's really, I feel all other healing depends on that one, whether it's emotional or physical or even mental. Depends on how I'm doing with my spiritual healing. So that will be what we explore this Saturday in Inner Fitness from 2 to 3 on the Zoom platform, which is available on the website. I believe our website is in the process of being updated, so it reflects September schedule. There's quite a bit going on. We've added another drop-in meditation Sunday evenings. It's a full hour from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. And this is by far one of the best ways to go beyond all the blah, blah, blah we're doing and actually experience and experiment for yourself. Really important to have a fairly good practice, regular practice of reflection. And so Tuesday and Thursday evening meditations continue as usual, 6:45 to 7:30. Interview with a Raj Yogi continues as usual, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7:35 to 8:15. This month we'll also have a bit of a Raj Yoga introductions course. It will be 1 hour sessions over 4 days, so Saturday, Sunday, and the following weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I know it's the third and fourth weekend of September. I don't have the exact dates. I think it's 19th, 20th, and then 26th, 27th, 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock p.m. And so just an hour long each session. Registration through Eventbrite. It will be on our website. We'll also have a Raj Yoga and You 2 sessions, each an hour long, a Saturday and Sunday of a weekend. It's the second weekend in September, which is the 12th and the 13th of September, 1 to 2 p.m. Registration on Eventbrite. If you're not following any of this or listening to this in the month of October, but it's all on the website, or it will be on the website in a day or two. So please feel free to check that out if of interest. Thank you for joining this session. Until we meet again, Om Shanti.